Have you ever let fear rob you of a moment that could have changed everything you thought you knew about yourself? Well, hello there, my dear friends. Come gather around and make yourselves comfortable in that special place where we can share some time together, where stories unfold like gentle waves carrying wisdom from one generation to the next. I'm Joe, though most folks these days call me Grandpa Joe, and I'm deeply grateful you've chosen to spend part of your day here with me in our little sanctuary of reflection and remembrance. You know, at Stictive, I've learned that life's most profound lessons often come disguised as our most uncomfortable moments, wrapped up in situations where we're forced to choose between our fears and our hearts. Today, I want to share with you a story that unfolded on what should have been the most perfect day of my life, my wedding day in 1962, when I was 28 years old and thought I had everything figured out about what it meant to be a man, what it meant to be strong, and what it meant to show love. It's a story about a dance I never took, about an 89-year-old man in a wheelchair who saw something in me that I couldn't see in myself, and about the moment when I learned that our deepest regrets aren't always about the things we do. Sometimes they're about the beautiful opportunities we let slip away because we were too afraid to look foolish, too proud to be vulnerable, too concerned with appearances to embrace what really matters. But more than that, it's a story about discovering that grace isn't about perfection, that connection transcends physical limitations, and that sometimes the greatest gift you can give someone isn't your skill or your success. It's simply your willingness to show up authentically, flaws and all, in the moments when it matters most. If these conversations we share bring you comfort during quiet times, perhaps remind you of your own moments of choice between fear and love, or simply provide a gentle voice when the world feels too fast and too complicated, I would be deeply honored if you'd consider joining our growing family of friends here. Your presence tells me that these stories have value, that the lessons we've gathered through decades of living can offer genuine guidance to others walking similar paths. Now, let me take you back to a time that feels both like yesterday and several lifetimes ago. A crisp October morning in 1962, when the air smelled of fallen leaves and possibility. When I stood before a mirror in my childhood bedroom, adjusting my tie for the third time and convincing myself that I was ready for the biggest day of my life. Completely unaware that I was about to face a challenge that would teach me more about courage and love than anything I'd experienced in my first 28 years. But if you will, a young man standing in front of that mirror, smoothing his hair and practicing his vows one final time. That young man was me, and I was absolutely terrified, not about marrying Patricia, the woman who had captured my heart and transformed my understanding of what love could be, but about all the small moments throughout the day when I might embarrass myself, might reveal that underneath the confident exterior I tried to project, I was just someone doing his best to figure out how to be the man everyone expected me to be. You see, I had always been what you might call gracefully awkward, and I could handle myself well in most situations. I was comfortable giving speeches, confident in my work, capable of holding my own in any conversation. But put me on a dance floor, asked me to move my body to music in front of other people, and I became a bundle of self-consciousness and poorly coordinated limbs that seemed to have minds of their own. This had been a source of anxiety throughout my courtship with Patricia. She loved to dance, really loved it. When we went to community events or celebrations, she would watch other couples gliding across the floor with a wistful expression that she tried to hide, but that I could read as clearly as words on a page. She never complained, never made me feel guilty about my reluctance to join her, but I knew that my fear of looking foolish was depriving us both of something that could bring joy to our relationship. I had promised myself that our wedding would be different. Well, I'd even taken a few private lessons from Mrs. Henderson, an elderly lady who taught ballroom dancing in her living room and who assured me that with practice and patience, anyone could learn to move with dignity and grace. But despite her encouragement and my earnest efforts, I remained convinced that I looked like a scarecrow in a windstorm whenever I attempted anything more complex than a basic sway. The morning of our wedding was perfect in every way that mattered. The sun was shining, but not too bright. There was a gentle breeze that rustled the leaves but wouldn't disturb Patricia's carefully arranged hair. And the small church where we would exchange vows looked like something from a storybook, decorated with autumn flowers and filled with everyone we loved most in the world. Patricia's family had traveled from 3 states away to be with us, including her grandfather, William, though everyone called him Pop, who had made the journey despite being 89 years old and confined to a wheelchair after a stroke the previous year. Pop was a legend in their family, a man who had lived through 2 world wars, the Great Depression, and countless smaller adventures that he recounted with the kind of vivid detail that made you feel you were right there beside him. I had met Pop several times during my courtship with Patricia, and he had always treated me with a mixture of warmth and gentle scrutiny that let me know he was evaluating whether I was worthy of his granddaughter's love. He was sharp as a tack mentally, with eyes that seemed to see right through whatever facade you might be trying to maintain, and a way of asking questions that revealed more about your character than you might have intended to share. But he was also kind, with a ready laugh and an endless supply of stories that could make even the most ordinary evening feel like an adventure. He had been married to his beloved Rose for 63 years before she passed away just 6 months before our wedding, and he carried their love story with him like a treasured photograph, bringing it out to share whenever young couples needed to understand what real partnership looked like, and the ceremony itself was everything we had dreamed it would be. Patricia looked absolutely radiant in her grandmother's wedding dress, which had been carefully altered to fit her perfectly while preserving every detail that made it special. And when she walked down the aisle, guided by her father but with her eyes locked on mine, I felt a sense of completeness that I hadn't known was possible, as if every moment of my life had been leading to this perfect convergence of love and commitment. We exchanged vows that we had written ourselves, promising not just to love each other, but to grow together, to support each other's dreams, to face challenges as a team, and to remember that marriage was not just about finding the right person, but about being the right person for each other. The words felt sacred as we spoke them, witnessed by our families and blessed by the gentle morning light streaming through the church windows. The reception was held in the church's fellowship hall, which had been transformed into something magical by Patricia's mother and aunts, who had spent weeks creating centerpieces, stringing lights, and arranging everything with the kind of loving attention to detail that can only come from family. The Monquis tables were covered with white tablecloths and decorated with small bouquets of chrysanthemums and autumn leaves, and the whole space felt warm and intimate, exactly what we had wanted for this celebration of our new beginning. During dinner, I found myself relaxing in a way I hadn't expected. The conversations flowed easily, the food was delicious, and the atmosphere was filled with the kind of joy that comes from bringing together all the people who matter most to celebrate something truly worth celebrating. I was beginning to think that my worries about embarrassing myself had been overblown, that the day would pass smoothly without any moments that would require me to step outside my comfort zone. I was wrong. Of course, right after dinner, as the tables were being cleared and the small band that Patricia's uncle had arranged began setting up their instruments, I noticed Pop maneuvering his wheelchair closer to where Patricia and I were receiving congratulations from our guests. He had a determined expression on his face that I was beginning to recognize as the look he got when he had something important to say. "Joseph," he called to me, using my full name in the formal way that somehow conveyed both respect and expectation. "Come over here for a moment, would you?" I excused myself from the conversation I was having with one of my college friends and walked over to where Pop was positioned near the edge of what would soon become the dance floor. He looked up at me with those clear blue eyes that had seen so much of life, and I could tell that whatever he wanted to discuss was more than casual wedding day conversation. "Patricia tells me you're not much of a dancer," he said, not unkindly but with the directness that was characteristic of his generation. People who had learned not to waste time on unnecessary politeness when there were important things to be said, and I felt my face warm with embarrassment. "I'm afraid that's true, Pop. I'm probably the only groom in history who's hoping the band will stick to slow songs all evening. He chuckled, but there was something thoughtful in his expression. You know, my son, I haven't been able to dance since my stroke 6 months ago. These old legs just won't cooperate anymore, and this wheelchair has become my constant companion. But I've been sitting here watching Patricia, seeing how her eyes light up every time she hears music. And I've been thinking about something. He paused, looking toward the band's stand where the musicians were tuning their instruments, then back at me. Before Rose died, before this stroke took away my ability to move the way I used to, dancing was one of our greatest joys. Not because we were particularly good at it, Lord knows. We stepped on each other's toes plenty over the years, but because it was our way of celebrating life, of showing each other and the world that we were partners in every sense of the word. I nodded, not sure where this conversation was headed, but sensing that it was building towards something significant. I've been watching you today, Pop continued, and I can see that you're a good man, someone who loves my granddaughter deeply and will take care of her the way she deserves. But I can also see that you're holding back from something that could bring both of you a lot of joy. And I think I understand why. He gestured toward the dance floor, which was still empty, but would soon be filled with couples celebrating our union. When that band starts playing, when the music begins and everyone expects the bride and groom to lead the first dance, you're going to be tempted to get it over with as quickly as possible, to do the minimum required and then retreat to the safety of conversation and cake cutting. His assessment was so accurate that I felt exposed, as if he had been reading my thoughts throughout the entire planning process for this moment I had been dreading. Pop, I appreciate what you're saying, but I really am terrible at dancing. I've taken lessons, I've practiced, but I just don't have the coordination for it. The last thing I want is to embarrass Patricia on our wedding day by stumbling around the dance floor like I don't know my left foot from my right. Pop's expression grew gentle, and he reached out to take my hand in both of his. His hands were aged and marked by decades of work and life, but his grip was firm and warm, conveying a strength that had nothing to do with physical power. Ohio, let me tell you something I learned over 63 years of marriage, something that took me far too long to understand. Dancing isn't about your feet. It's not about steps or timing or looking graceful for other people. A real dancing, the kind that matters, is about connection. It's about two people moving together and supporting each other, sharing a moment that belongs only to them. He looked toward Patricia, who was across the room accepting congratulations from some of her college friends, her face glowing with happiness. That girl over there married you not because you are perfect, but because you're perfect for her. She doesn't need you to be Fred Astaire. She just needs you to be present, to be willing to hold her close and move with her, to show everyone in this room that you're proud to be her husband and that no amount of self-consciousness could keep you from celebrating this moment with her. His words were hitting something deep inside me, challenging assumptions I had carried for years about what it meant to be competent, about what it meant to show love, about what it meant to be brown. But Pop, I said, still resistant, what if I really do embarrass her? What if I step on her dress or trip or just look ridiculous? This is being photographed. People will remember this moment forever. Pop smiled, and there was something almost mischievous in his expression. Joseph, let me ask you something. When you look back on your life so far, are your deepest regrets about the times you tried something and it didn't go perfectly? Or are they about the times you let fear keep you from trying at all? The question hit me like a physical blow, because I knew immediately what the answer was. My deepest regrets weren't about failed attempts or imperfect performances. They were about opportunities I had let slip away because I was too worried about looking foolish, too concerned with maintaining an image of competence that probably mattered far less to other people than it did to me. I can see from your expression that you know what I'm talking about. I continued, now, I have a proposition for you. Something that might help you understand what I mean about dancing being about connection rather than perfection. He maneuvered his wheelchair slightly, positioning himself so that he could see both me and the empty dance floor. When that band starts playing, when it's time for the traditional first dance, I want you to do something for me. I want you to wheel me out onto that dance floor. And I want you to let me show you what dancing really means. I stared at him, not understanding. Pop, I don't think I follow. You said yourself that the stroke took away my ability to move my legs, he interrupted gently. But it didn't take away my understanding of what it means to connect with another person through movement, through shared rhythm, through the simple act of being present together in a moment of celebration. He looked directly into my eyes, and I could see a lifetime of wisdom and experience in his gaze. I want you to wheel me onto that dance floor. And then I want you to dance with Patricia while I provide the foundation, the stability, the reminder that dancing is about so much more than fancy footwork. Moi, I was beginning to understand what he was suggesting, but it seemed impossible. Pop, people will think it's strange. They'll wonder what we're doing. People will see, he said firmly, an old man who loves his granddaughter enough to find a way to participate in one of the most important moments of her life, and a young man who loves her enough to look beyond his own insecurities to give her something beautiful. They'll see 3 generations connected by love and commitment, showing everyone in that room what it really means to support each other. The ballad was beginning to play softly in the background, warming up with gentle melodies that filled the fellowship hall with the promise of celebration and dancing. I could see Patricia looking in our direction, probably wondering what her grandfather and I were discussing so intently. But what if I still mess up, I asked, my voice revealing the vulnerability I had been trying to hide. What if even with your help, I still can't manage to look like I know what I'm doing? Pop's expression became infinitely gentle, and when he spoke, his voice carried the kind of compassion that can only come from someone who has lived long enough to understand what really matters in life. Joseph, let me tell you about the first dance Rose and I shared after we were married. It was at a little dance hall in our hometown, and I was so nervous that I forgot everything I thought I knew about leading. I stepped on her dress twice, turned left when I should have turned right, and generally made such a spectacle of myself that people were either trying not to laugh or trying not to look away in embarrassment. He chuckled at the memory, but there was tenderness in his expression. But you know what Rose told me afterward? She said it was the most beautiful dance of her life, not because it was technically perfect, but because every stumble, every uncertain step, every moment of the clumsiness showed her how much I cared about making that moment special for her. And she said she could feel my love in every awkward movement, could see my desire to make her happy in every earnest attempt to do something that didn't come naturally to me. The band was starting to play more recognizable songs now, and I could see other family members beginning to look toward Patricia and me expectantly, knowing that the traditional first dance would be announced soon. Son, Pop continued, I'm going to be 90 years old next month. If the good Lord allows it, I've lived through more adventures and challenges than most people see in several lifetimes. I've loved deeply, lost people who meant everything to me, made mistakes that taught me important lessons, and experienced woes that still fill my heart even when everything else feels difficult. And paused, looking around the room at all the family and friends who had gathered to celebrate Patricia's and my union. And if I've learned anything in all those years, it's that the moments we remember most clearly, the ones that define our relationships and shape our understanding of love, are almost never the moments when everything went perfectly according to plan. They're the moments when someone we care about chose to be vulnerable for our sake, when they stepped outside their comfort zone to give us something beautiful, when they showed us that we mattered more to them than their own self-consciousness. Patricia was walking toward us now, Having excused herself from her conversation and apparently sensing that something important was happening between her grandfather and her new husband, and she looked radiant in her wedding dress, her face glowing with the happiness of the day. But I could also see curiosity in her expression as she wondered what Pop and I had been discussing so seriously. "What are you two plotting over here?" she asked as she reached us. Her tone light, but her eyes showing that she understood this was more than casual conversation. Pop took her hand in his free one, so that he was connected to both of us, forming a small circle of 3 generations bound by love and family. "I was just explaining to your husband about the difference between dancing and really dancing, and suggesting that maybe it's time for him to learn what his new wife already knows about the importance of connection over perfection." Oh, Patricia looked between Pop and me, understanding beginning to dawn in her eyes. She had heard enough of our conversation to realize that something significant was being discussed, something that went beyond the simple mechanics of wedding reception traditions. "Pop has an idea," I said, my voice uncertain but carrying a note of possibility that surprised me. "He wants to help us with our first dance, to show me that dancing is about more than just not stepping on your toes." Patricia's expression grew soft, and I could see that she understood immediately what her grandfather was offering. Not just assistance with a challenging moment, but a lesson about love and courage that would stay with us for the rest of our lives. "Grandpa," she said, her voice thick with emotion, "you don't have to do that. I know this is hard for you, not being able to dance the way you used to." Pop shook his head, smiling. "Sweetheart, I may not be able to move my legs the way I once did, but I can still feel the rhythm in my heart. I can still remember what it means to celebrate love through movement and music, and more than anything, I want to be part of this moment with you and Joseph, to help him understand something that it took me years to learn." The band leader was approaching our little group, ready to announce the traditional first dance and invite the bride and groom to take the floor. I could feel the moment of decision approaching, the point where I would either embrace this opportunity that Pop was offering or retreat into the safety of my fears and miss something that might never come again. "What exactly are you suggesting?" I asked, still uncertain but increasingly drawn to the possibility of stepping beyond my limitations. Pop's eyes lit up with the kind of enthusiasm that had probably gotten him into wonderful trouble throughout his 89 years. "Here's what we're going to do. When they announce the first dance, you're going to wheel me out onto that dance floor, right into the center where everyone can see us. And then you're going to take Patricia in your arms, and I'm going to provide the foundation while you two move together." He looked between Patricia and me, making sure we understood what he was proposing. "I'll be your anchor, your stability, your reminder that dancing is about partnership and support rather than individual performance. You'll be able to feel that you're connected to something steady and strong. And Patricia will be able to see that you're willing to try something new for her sake, even if it means being vulnerable in front of everyone we love." Patricia was crying now. "Buzz, I swear you was by now." Not tears of sadness, but tears of the deep emotion that comes from witnessing love in its most generous and creative forms. And she squeezed Pop's hand and looked at me with an expression that conveyed more than words ever could about what this gesture would mean to her. "Joseph," she said softly, "you don't have to do this if it makes you too uncomfortable. Married you knowing that dancing wasn't your thing, and I'm perfectly happy just swaying together for a few minutes and then sitting down, but looking at her face, seeing the love and understanding in her eyes, feeling the warmth and wisdom radiating from Pop's presence. I knew that this was one of those moments when you have a choice between fear and love, between playing it safe and embracing something beautiful and uncertain. Actually, as I saw, surprising myself with the steadiness in my voice. I think Pop's idea sounds perfect. I think it was time I learned what dancing really means." The band leader had reached our group and was waiting politely for our attention. "Excuse me, folks, but we're ready to invite the bride and groom to the floor for their first dance as husband and wife. Would you like us to announce it now?" I looked at Pop, then at Patricia, then back at the band leader. "Yes," I said, feeling a surge of something that might have been courage, or might have been love, and realizing that maybe they were the same thing. But we're going to do something a little different. We'd like to invite Patricia's grandfather to join us on the dance floor. The band leader looked slightly confused, but he nodded agreeably. Of course, whatever you'd like. Should I mention that in the announcement? Just tell everyone that we're inviting family to join us for this first dance, I said, beginning to understand that what we were about to do was bigger than just solving my dancing anxiety. It was about creating a moment that honored the connections between generations, that celebrated the ways love finds to overcome limitations, that showed everyone in that room what it really means to support each other. As the band leader walked back to the microphone, Pop reached up and took both Patricia's hand in mine. "Now listen carefully," he said, his voice carrying the authority of someone who had navigated countless challenges throughout his long life. "When we get out there, Joseph, I want you to position my wheelchair so that I'm facing you and Patricia. Then I want you to put one hand on the back of my chair and take Patricia's hand with the other." He demonstrated the positioning with his hands, showing us how we would form a connected triangle on the dance floor. "Patricia, you'll put your free hand on Joseph's shoulder, the way you would in any traditional dance position. But instead of trying to lead or follow in the usual way, you'll both be connected to me as your anchor point." I was beginning to see how this might work, how Pop's wheelchair could provide the stability and foundation that would allow Patricia and me to move together without my having to worry about complex steps or precise timing. "The key," Pop continued, "is to listen to the music together, to let it guide your movement rather than trying to impose some predetermined pattern on it. Or feel the rhythm in your heart, not just in your feet. Ishwayas on each other and on the joy of this moment, on the celebration of your love. Let everything else, the watching eyes, the photographer, your concerns about perfection, fade into the background." Patricia was nodding, her eyes bright with anticipation and love. "It sounds beautiful, Grandpa, but are you sure you're up for this? I don't want you to strain yourself." Pop chuckled. "Sweetheart, I've been waiting 6 months for an opportunity to dance again. Even if it's not in the way I used to, this old heart can still feel the music, and these old arms can still provide support and guidance. Besides, there's nowhere I'd rather be right now than sharing this moment with the two people who represent the future of our family." The band leader was approaching the microphone, and conversations around the room were beginning to quiet as people sensed that the formal part of the reception was about to begin. I felt that familiar flutter of nervousness in my stomach, but underneath it was something new, a sense of anticipation, of possibility, of connection that I had never experienced before. "Ladies and gentlemen," the band leader announced, his voice carrying clearly through the fellowship hall, "it's time to invite our newlyweds, Mr. and Mrs. Joseph Benedict, to the floor for their first dance as husband and wife. And they've asked to be joined by a very special family member for this meaningful moment." The room erupted in gentle applause, and I could see people turning in their chairs to watch as I moved behind Pop's wheelchair and began pushing him toward the center of the dance floor. Patricia walked beside us, her hand resting lightly on Pop's shoulder, her wedding dress rustling softly as we made our way through the space that had been cleared for dancing. As we reached the center of the floor, I could feel the attention of everyone in the room focused on us. But instead of the self-consciousness I had expected, I felt something else, a sense of pride in what we were about to do, a recognition that this moment was about something much larger than my personal insecurities. I positioned Pop's wheelchair as he had instructed, so that he was facing Patricia and me, forming the third point of our triangle. And then I placed one hand on the back of his chair, feeling the solid strength of his presence, and reached for Patricia's hand with the other. She stepped closer, placing her free hand on my shoulder, and suddenly we were connected. 3 generations, 3 different perspectives on love and commitment, 3 hearts beating in rhythm with the gentle music that was beginning to fill the air around us. The song the band had chosen was "The Way You Look Tonight," A classic that was old enough to mean something to Pop, but young enough to feel romantic and contemporary to Patricia and me. As the melody began, I felt Pop's hand cover mine where it rested on his wheelchair, providing an additional point of connection and stability. "Now," he whispered, just loud enough for Patricia and me to hear. "Forget about everyone else in this room, Brie. Forget about the photographer. Forget about trying to look graceful. Forget about anything except this moment and the two people you are sharing it with." I looked into Patricia's eyes, and something shifted inside me. Instead of focusing on my feet or worrying about what steps to take next, I found myself simply moving with her, letting the music guide us in a gentle, swaying motion that felt natural and unforced. Pop's wheelchair provided the anchor point he had promised, giving us stability and connection, while allowing us to move together in ways that felt spontaneous and joyful, rather than choreographed and anxious. His presence reminded us that dancing wasn't about individual performance, but about shared experience, about creating something beautiful together that none of us could create alone. As we moved together, I began to understand what Pop had been trying to teach me. This wasn't about technique or precision. It was about being present, about celebrating our love in a way that honored both the moment and the people who had gathered to witness it. It was about showing Patricia that she mattered more to me than my own self-consciousness, that I was willing to step outside my comfort zone to give her something beautiful. "You're doing beautifully," Pop murmured, his voice filled with pride and satisfaction. "Look around you, son. Look at the faces of everyone watching. They're not judging your footwork. They're witnessing love in action." I glanced around the room without breaking the rhythm of our movement. And Pop was right. The faces I could see were filled with warmth and joy, with appreciation for what we were sharing rather than critical assessment of our technical skills. Patricia's mother was crying happy tears. My own parents were beaming with pride, and the friends and family who surrounded us were clearly moved by the connection they were witnessing. But more than anything, I was focused on Patricia's face, on the expression of pure happiness and love that told me this moment was everything she had hoped it would be and more. She wasn't looking at my feet or worrying about whether we were moving correctly. She was looking into my eyes with the kind of deep contentment that comes from feeling truly seen and celebrated by someone who loves you. "This is perfect," she whispered, her voice filled with emotion. "This is exactly what I always dreamed our first dance would be like." As the song continued, something remarkable happened. I stopped thinking about dancing as something I was bad at and started experiencing it as something we were creating together. The gentle movement, the shared rhythm, the connection between all three of us. It felt less like a performance and more like a celebration. Less like something to endure and more like something to savor. Wash's presence provided more than just physical stability. His lifetime of love and wisdom seemed to flow through the connection we shared, reminding us that what we were experiencing was part of a much larger story about commitment and partnership that stretched back through generations and would continue forward through ours. "You know," Pop said quietly, his voice barely audible above the music. "This is exactly what dancing looked like when Rose and I were young. Not the fancy stuff you see in movies, but real people celebrating real love in the simplest, most authentic way possible." As the song drew toward its close, I realized that something fundamental had shifted in my understanding, not just about dancing, but about vulnerability, about love, about what it means to show up authentically for the people who matter most to you. I had been so focused on the possibility of looking foolish that I had almost missed the opportunity to create something beautiful. The final notes of the music faded, and the room erupted in applause that was warm and genuine, filled with appreciation for what they had just witnessed. But instead of feeling relief that it was over, I found myself wishing the song had been longer, that this moment of connection and celebration could have continued. Patricia leaned down to kiss Pop's cheek, her eyes bright with tears of gratitude. "Thank you, Grandpa," she whispered. "Thank you for showing us what dancing really means." Pop reached right up to pat her hand, his own eyes moist with emotion. Thank you both for letting an old man be part of something so beautiful. This is a memory I'll treasure for whatever time I have left. As other couples began joining us on the dance floor for the next song, I realized that Pop had given us something far more valuable than dancing lessons. He had shown us that love finds ways to overcome limitations, that generations can support each other in the most creative and meaningful ways, and that sometimes the most beautiful moments come from embracing vulnerability rather than avoiding it. "Are you ready for the next song?" Patricia asked. Her hand still in mine, her eyes sparkling with the confidence that comes from sharing something perfect with someone you love. I looked down at Pop, who was smiling up at us with the satisfaction of someone who had just witnessed his plan unfold exactly as he had hoped. "What do you say, Pop? Are you up for another dance?" "Son," he replied with a grin that took years off his 89-year-old face. "I could do this all night, but I think it's time for you two to try it on your own. You've learned what you needed to learn." As the next song began, a slightly more upbeat number that would require a bit more movement, I realized that Pop was right. Something had changed during that first dance. Something that went beyond technique or confidence, but I had learned to focus on connection rather than perfection, on sharing rather than performing, on love rather than fear. Patricia and I moved onto the dance floor alone this time, but I could feel Pop's wisdom and support continuing to guide us. The lessons he had taught about being present, about embracing vulnerability, about understanding that dancing is really about partnership, stayed with us as we moved together through song after song. It wasn't that I had suddenly become a graceful dancer, and I still occasionally stepped on Patricia's toes, still sometimes lost the rhythm or turned the wrong direction. But none of that mattered anymore, because I had learned what Pop had been trying to teach me, that the people who love you aren't judging your performance. They're celebrating your willingness to show up authentically and share something beautiful with them. As the evening progressed, I found myself thinking about all the other areas of my life where I had let fear of imperfection keep me from trying new things, from taking risks, from embracing opportunities that could have brought joy and connection. Wamba's lesson about dancing was really a lesson about living, about understanding that waiting until you're ready often means waiting forever. That showing up with love and authentic intention matters more than showing up with flawless execution. During a break between songs, Pop wheeled himself over to where Patricia and I were catching our breath and accepting congratulations from wedding guests who had been moved by our unconventional first dance. "You two look like you're really getting the hang of this," he said, his voice filled with pride and satisfaction. "We had a good teacher," I replied, placing my hand on his shoulder. "Pop, I can't thank you enough for what you did tonight. You didn't just help me learn to dance. You taught me something about courage that I think will change how I approach a lot of things in life." Pop's expression grew thoughtful, and I could see him considering his words carefully. "Can I tell you something that I hope you'll remember for the rest of your married life? Tonight, you chose love over fear. You chose connection over comfort. You chose to give Patricia something beautiful, even though it required you to be vulnerable. That's what marriage is really about. Not just the big moments like wedding days, but all the small daily choices to put your partner's happiness above your own self-consciousness." He paused, looking around the room at all the family and friends who were celebrating with us. "Rose and I were married for 63 years, and I can tell you that the moments I treasure most weren't the times when everything went perfectly according to plan. They were the times when one of us chose to try something new for the other's sake, when we supported each other through challenges, when we found creative ways to show love, even when circumstances weren't ideal." Patricia had been listening intently, and I could see that Pop's words were resonating with her as deeply as they were with me. "Grandpa," she said, "what you gave us tonight, it's something we'll carry with us always. Not just the memory of dancing together, but the lesson about supporting each other, about finding the ways to include everyone in our celebrations, about understanding that love is creative and generous and always finds a way." Pop smiled, but there was something bittersweet in his expression that I was only beginning to recognize. I'm so grateful I got to be part of this with you. When Rose died and then this stroke happened, I wasn't sure I'd ever feel useful again, ever have anything valuable to contribute to the family. But tonight reminded me that wisdom and love can find expression in ways I never expected. The band was starting up again, playing a slower song that would be perfect for couples of all ages and dancing abilities. Around us, I could see Patricia's parents, so my parents, and aunts and uncles, and family friends all moving onto the dance floor, inspired by what they had witnessed to create their own moments of connection and celebration. "Would you like to dance with us again, Pop?" Patricia asked, leaning down to take his hand, but Pop shook his head gently. "This time, I think I'll just watch and enjoy seeing what you two have learned. But I want you to know that every time you dance together from now on, whether it's at celebrations like this or just in your living room on a quiet evening, you'll be carrying forward something that Rose and I shared, something that my parents shared, something that connects you to all the couples who have ever discovered that love expresses itself through simple acts of togetherness." As Patricia and I made our way back onto the dance floor, I felt the truth of Pop's words settling into my heart. We weren't just dancing, we were participating in something timeless and universal, something that connected us to generations of couples who had found joy in moving together to music, in sharing rhythm and closeness, in the simple pleasure of celebrating love. The rest of the evening was magical in ways I had never expected. Patricia and I danced to almost every song, sometimes alone, sometimes with family members cutting in, sometimes in the midst of a crowded floor filled with couples of all ages expressing their own versions of love and partnership. I even danced with Patricia's grandmother, my own mother, when several aunts who seemed delighted that the groom had finally overcome his reluctance to participate in this essential wedding tradition. But the moment that stayed with me most clearly was near the end of the reception, when the band played their final slow song and I looked over to see Pop watching us with an expression of deep contentment and satisfaction. He caught my eye and nodded, a small gesture that conveyed everything he couldn't say in that crowded, noisy room: that he was proud of us, that he was happy to have been part of our special day, that he had found meaning and purpose in sharing something precious from his own life experience. After the last guest had departed and we were cleaning up the fellowship hall with the help of family members, Pop approached Patricia and me one final time that evening. "I have something for you," he said, reaching into a small bag that had been attached to his wheelchair. He pulled out an old photograph, slightly faded but still clear, showing him and Rose dancing at what appeared to be their own wedding reception many decades earlier. "This was taken on our wedding day in 1890, he explained, handing the photograph to Patricia. "Rose always said it captured the exact moment when we stopped being nervous about how we looked and started enjoying how we felt. And I want you to have it, to remind you that what you shared tonight is part of a long tradition of couples who understood that dancing is really about everything except dancing." Patricia took the photograph with tears in her eyes, studying the young couple who would go on to share 63 years of marriage, 6 children, countless grandchildren, and more adventures than most people experience in several lifetimes. "Look at how young they were," she whispered, showing me the image of Pop and Rose, probably not much older than we were, gazing at each other with the same mixture of love and wonder that I had seen in Patricia's eyes throughout our own wedding day. We were terrified and ecstatic and completely unprepared for everything that was ahead of us, Pop said with a chuckle, just like every couple who has ever stood at the beginning of their life together. But we had learned something important that night about supporting each other, about being willing to try new things together, about understanding that love is both stronger and more flexible than we usually give it credit for. As we prepared to leave the church and head to our honeymoon destination, Pop asked if he could speak with me privately for a moment. Patricia kissed his cheek and went to collect some final items from the bride's changing room, leaving us alone near the decorated altar where we had exchanged vows just hours earlier. "Joseph," he said, his voice carrying the weight of everything he had experienced and learned throughout his long life. Tonight you discovered something about yourself that I hope you'll remember during all the years ahead. You learned that you're capable of more than you think you are. That love can give you courage you didn't know you possessed. That stepping outside your comfort zone for someone else's sake is one of the most beautiful gifts you can offer. He paused, looking around the quiet church where so many important moments in his family's history had taken place. And marriage is going to present you with countless opportunities to make that same choice between fear and love, between playing it safe and embracing something new, between focusing on your own insecurities and focusing on what you can give to your partner. When I nodded, understanding that this conversation was about much more than wedding reception dancing. Pop was sharing wisdom that came from decades of making choices, facing challenges, learning from mistakes, and discovering what really matters in a life shared with another person. The dance we shared tonight was just the beginning, he continued. In every day of your marriage, you'll have chances to dance with Patricia in metaphorical ways, to support her dreams even when they scare you, to try new things because they matter to her, to choose vulnerability over self-protection, to remember that partnership means finding creative ways to overcome whatever limitations you might face. Patricia was walking back toward us, her wedding dress carefully gathered in her arms, her face glowing with the happiness and exhaustion that come from a perfect day of celebration. And remember, Papa added quietly, that the most beautiful dances aren't the ones where everything goes according to plan. They're the ones where people who love each other find ways to move together despite obstacles, where generations support each other, where wisdom and youth combine to create something neither could achieve alone. As Patricia reached us, Pop took both our hands in his once more. "Thank you for letting me be part of your beginning," he said, his voice thick with emotion. The night reminded me that every ending is also a beginning, that every limitation can become an opportunity for creativity, that love always finds a way to express itself if we're brave enough to let it. And then, the drive to our honeymoon destination was filled with quiet conversation about the day, about the unexpected beauty of sharing our first dance with Pop, about the lessons we had learned and the memories we had created. But underneath our words was a deeper understanding that something significant had happened. We had experienced our first real lesson in married life, our first glimpse of what it means to support each other, to include others in our joy, to understand that love is most beautiful when it's generous and inclusive rather than exclusive and self-protective. Our honeymoon was wonderful in all the expected ways. But when we returned home and began settling into married life, we found ourselves thinking often about Pop's lesson and looking for ways to apply it to our daily experience of partnership and love. We bought a record player and started collecting albums of the music we had danced to at our wedding, creating our own tradition of dancing in our living room on Friday evenings after dinner. At first, I was still self-conscious about my technique, still worried about looking graceful or competent. But gradually, Patricia's patience and Pop's wisdom helped me understand that our private dances weren't about performance. They were about connection, about setting aside the concerns and distractions of the week to focus completely on each other. Over the months and years that followed, we developed our own style of dancing that incorporated elements of what Pop had taught us. And sometimes we danced in the traditional one, with Patricia in my arms and both of us moving together to the rhythm of whatever music was playing. Sometimes we danced while doing household chores, turning mundane tasks into opportunities for playfulness and affection. Sometimes we danced without music at all, simply holding each other and swaying together while talking about our day or making plans for the future. We also made a point of staying connected with Pop, visiting him regularly and often inviting him to join us for our Friday evening dance sessions. He never again physically participated the way he had at our wedding, but his presence provided continuity and wisdom, reminding us that what we were building together was part of a larger story about love and commitment that stretched across generations. Pop lived for 3 more years after our wedding, and during that time he became one of my most important mentors, teaching me not just about marriage but about aging, about finding meaning and purpose in different stages of life, about understanding that wisdom grows rather than diminishes as we accumulate experience and perspective. He shared stories about his marriage to Rose that helped Patricia and me navigate our own challenges and celebrations. And he taught me about the importance of patience, about the difference between supporting your spouse and trying to fix them, about understanding that a good marriage requires both individuals to continue growing while also growing together. But most importantly, he continued to model the lesson he had taught us at our wedding. That love finds creative ways to express itself regardless of circumstances. That supporting each other sometimes requires thinking outside conventional boundaries. That the most meaningful moments often come from embracing vulnerability rather than avoiding it. And when Pop passed away in 1965, Patricia and I felt the loss deeply. But we also felt profound gratitude for the time we had been able to spend with him and the lessons he had shared. His funeral was held in the same church where we had been married, and as we sat in the front pew, holding hands and remembering all the ways he had enriched our lives, I thought about the dance we had shared and how it had become a metaphor for everything he had taught us about love and support and creative problem solving. The minister spoke about Pop's long life, his service to his country and his community, his devotion to his family, and his ability to find joy and meaning even during the most challenging circumstances. But what I remembered most clearly was the way he had transformed what could have been an embarrassing moment into something beautiful. The way he had used his limitations as an opportunity to teach and give rather than as an excuse to withdraw from life. After the service, as family and friends gathered to share memories and support each other, several people approached Patricia and me to talk about our wedding dance and how it had affected them. Patricia's aunt mentioned that it had inspired her and her husband to start dancing again after years of feeling too old or too self-conscious. Then one of my college friends said it had taught him something about the importance of being willing to look foolish for love. A neighbor who had been at the wedding said she still thought about it whenever she faced a situation that required her to step outside her comfort zone. I realized that Pop's lesson had rippled outward in ways none of us had anticipated, affecting not just Patricia and me, but everyone who had witnessed our unconventional first dance. His creative solution to my anxiety and his generous inclusion in our celebration had demonstrated something powerful about the way wisdom and love can multiply when they're shared openly and authentically. In the years that followed Pop's death, Patricia and I continued to apply his lessons to every aspect of our marriage and our lives. When we face challenges, financial difficulties, health problems, career changes, the normal stresses and strains that every couple encounters, we tried to approach them the way Pop had approached my dancing anxiety, with creativity, with mutual support, with a willingness to try unconventional solutions, and with faith that love would find a way. When our children were born, we made sure they knew stories about their great-grandfather and the lessons he had taught about courage and vulnerability and the importance of supporting each other. We taught them to dance not just as a social skill, but as a metaphor for partnership, for being willing to move together even when you are not sure of the steps, for understanding that the most beautiful moments often come from embracing rather than avoiding uncertainty. We also made sure they understood that dancing, like everything else in life, wasn't about individual perfection, but about connection and shared experience. When our son David was learning to dance for his own wedding, we shared Pop's wisdom about focusing on love rather than technique, about understanding that the people who matter most aren't judging your performance, but celebrating your willingness to try. When our daughter Sarah was nervous about trying out for the school play, we told her about Pop's lesson that sometimes the most meaningful opportunities require us to step outside our comfort zones. That courage isn't the absence of fear, but the decision to act with love despite fear. As Patricia and I moved through our middle years and began to understand more about aging and the transitions that come with time, we often thought about Pop's example of finding new ways to contribute and connect, even when circumstances limited his options. His creativity in turning his wheelchair into a dance partner, his wisdom in seeing opportunity rather than just limitation, his generosity in sharing his knowledge and experience. All of these provided a model for how we wanted to approach our own later years. When I retired from my job as a high school English teacher, I was initially worried about losing the sense of purpose and identity that had come from my career. But remembering Pop's example, I looked for creative ways to continue contributing to young people's lives. Volunteering as a tutor, sharing stories and wisdom with grandchildren and neighborhood kids, understanding that the end of one role could be the beginning of another. And when Patricia developed arthritis that made traditional dancing difficult, we found new ways to share music and movement that accommodated her physical limitations while still honoring the connection and joy that dancing had always represented in our relationship. We attended concerts where we could listen and sway together without the pressure of formal dancing. We created playlists of meaningful songs and listened to them while holding hands and remembering the stories connected to each piece of music. But most importantly, we continued to understand dancing as Pop had taught us, not as a technical skill, but as a metaphor for all the ways that people who love each other can find to move together through life, supporting each other, adapting to changing circumstances, creating beauty and connection, despite whatever limitations they might face. Now, as I sit here at 60, looking back on more than 4 decades of marriage that began with that transformative wedding dance, I'm filled with gratitude for Pop's wisdom and for the way a simple act of generosity changed my understanding of so many important things. The lesson he taught me wasn't really about dancing, although learning to dance did bring Patricia and me joy throughout our marriage. The real lesson was about the choice we face in every challenging situation, between fear and love, between self-protection and vulnerability, between playing it safe and embracing the unknown. Bush showed me that courage isn't about being fearless. It's about acting with love despite your fears. He demonstrated that support doesn't always look traditional or conventional, that sometimes the most meaningful help comes from thinking creatively about how to overcome obstacles. He taught me that wisdom across generations can create solutions that none of us could have discovered alone. Most importantly, he showed me that the moments we remember most clearly, the ones that define our relationships and shape our understanding of love, are usually the ones when someone chose to be vulnerable for our sake, when they stepped outside their comfort zone to give us something beautiful, when they trusted that love was more important than pride or self-consciousness. I think about all the dances I might have missed if Pop hadn't intervened that night, not just the physical dances at our wedding reception, but all the metaphorical dances throughout our marriage, and the times when Patricia needed me to try something new for her sake, when supporting her required me to move beyond my comfort zone, when the best gift I could offer was my willingness to look foolish rather than let fear keep me from showing love. I think about the conversations I might have avoided, the adventures I might have declined, the opportunities for growth and connection I might have missed if Pop hadn't taught me that embarrassment is temporary, but regret can last a lifetime. I remember the last conversation I had with Pop before he died, when he was in the hospital and knew that his time was running short. Patricia and I had brought a small, battery-powered radio to his room, and we were listening to some of the music from our wedding while reminiscing about that special night. "You know," he said, his voice weak but his eyes still bright with the wisdom and mischief that had defined his long life, "I've been thinking about what made that dance so special. And I've realized it wasn't just that we found a way for me to participate despite my limitations. It was that all 3 of us were willing to trust each other completely, to try something new together, to create something that none of us could have achieved alone." He paused, looking between Patricia and me with the expression of someone who was trying to convey something important while he still had the chance. That's what I hope you'll remember about marriage, about family, about life itself. The most beautiful moments don't come from individual achievement or perfect execution. They come from people who love each other enough to be vulnerable together, to support each other's dreams even when they don't fully understand them, to find creative solutions when conventional approaches don't work, Those were among the last words Pop spoke to us, and they've stayed with me through all the years since, providing guidance and wisdom for countless situations that required me to choose between fear and love, between self-protection and generosity, between playing it safe and embracing the unknown. As I share this story with you today, my dear friends, I'm thinking about all the ways that Pop's lesson applies to the challenges and opportunities we face in our later years. Whether you're 60 or 70 or 80 or beyond, whether you're married or single, whether you're dealing with health issues or family complications or financial concerns, or simply the normal adjustments that come with aging, I believe Pop's wisdom has something to offer. Maybe you're facing a situation that requires you to try something new, to step outside your comfort zone, to embrace vulnerability for the sake of connection with someone you love. And maybe you're dealing with limitations, physical, financial, or otherwise, that seem to prevent you from participating in activities or relationships that matter to you. Maybe you're wondering whether you still have anything valuable to contribute, whether your experience and wisdom can find meaningful expression in a world that often seems to value youth over age. If so, I hope Pop's example will remind you that creativity and love can find ways to overcome almost any obstacle, that limitations can become opportunities for innovation rather than excuses for withdrawal, that the most beautiful contributions often come from people who are willing to think outside conventional boundaries. I hope you'll remember that dancing, whether literally or metaphorically, isn't about technical perfection, but about connection and shared experience. The people who love you aren't judging your performance. They're celebrating your willingness to show up authentically, to try something new, to choose love over fear. I hope you'll understand that supporting others and being supported doesn't always look traditional or conventional, that sometimes the most meaningful help comes from unexpected sources or takes unexpected forms. That wisdom and experience can express themselves in ways that surprise and delight both the giver and the receiver. Most importantly, I hope you'll embrace the truth that Pop taught me that night in 62, that love always finds a way to express itself if we're brave enough to let it. That the moments we treasure most are usually the ones when someone chose to be vulnerable for our sake. That the greatest gift we can give to anyone is our willingness to show up authentically, flaws and all. In the moments when it matters most. So the dance I almost didn't take turned out to be one of the most important moments of my life. Not because it was technically perfect, but because it taught me something essential about love and courage and the creative ways that generations can support each other. My trivial chair didn't prevent him from dancing. It became part of a new kind of dance that was more beautiful and meaningful than anything conventional could have been. Your limitations, whatever they might be, don't have to prevent you from participating fully in the relationships and activities that matter most to you, like Pop. You can find creative ways to contribute, to connect, to share your wisdom and experience in forms that honor both your capabilities and your limitations. That your age doesn't disqualify you from trying new things, from taking chances, from stepping outside your comfort zone for the sake of love or growth or simple joy. Like me learning to dance at 28, it's never too late to discover that you're capable of more than you think you are. That love can give you courage you didn't know you possessed. Your past experiences, even the difficult ones, have given you wisdom and perspective that can be incredibly valuable to others who are facing similar challenges. Like Pop sharing his understanding of what dancing really means, you have lessons to offer that come from living, from making mistakes, from learning and growing through decades of experience. And the story of the dance I never took and then did take, thanks to Pop's wisdom and generosity, is really a story about the choices we make between fear and love, between self-protection and vulnerability, between playing it safe and embracing the beautiful unknown. It's a story about understanding that the moments we remember most clearly are usually the ones when someone we love chose to step outside their comfort zone for our sake. As you navigate the challenges and opportunities of your own later years, I hope you'll remember Pop's lesson and look for chances to choose love over fear, to embrace vulnerability rather than self-protection, to understand that the most beautiful dances, literal and metaphorical, are often the ones where people support each other, adapt to circumstances, and create something together that none of them could achieve alone. The world needs more people who understand this balance, who know how to provide support without creating dependence, who can offer wisdom without insisting on control, who are willing to try new approaches when conventional methods don't work. In our later years, this may be one of the most important gifts we can give, not just to our own families, but to our communities and to the generations who will carry forward the values and principles we've spent our lives developing. So trust the wisdom you have gained through your own experiences of learning and growing. Have faith in the love you've shared and the connections you've built. And remember that creativity and generosity can overcome almost any limitation. That the most meaningful contributions often come from unexpected sources. That it's never too late to learn something new about yourself and what you're capable of achieving. The dance is still going on, my friends. The music is still playing. There's still time to step onto the floor, to embrace the beautiful unknown, to discover what's possible when love overcomes fear and creativity triumphs over limitation. Whether you're facing a literal dance floor or a metaphorical one, whether you're supporting someone else's dreams or pursuing your own, whether you're dealing with limitations or celebrating capabilities, remember that the most beautiful moments come from people who are willing to try, to connect, to support each other in whatever ways they can. Pop's wheelchair didn't stop him from dancing. It became part of a new kind of dance that was more meaningful than anything conventional could have been. Are your circumstances, whatever they might be, don't have to stop you from participating fully in the dance of life. They can become part of a new approach that honors both your limitations and your possibilities. That creates beauty and connection in ways you might never have imagined. The dance I never took became the dance that taught me everything I needed to know about love and courage and the creative ways that people can support each other across generations and circumstances. It showed me that fear is temporary, but regret can last a lifetime. That love always finds a way if we're brave enough to let it. That the most beautiful gifts are often the ones that require us to step outside our comfort zones. Whatever dances you're facing in your own life, literal or metaphorical, I hope you'll remember Pop's lesson and choose love over fear, connection over self-protection, creativity over convention. The music is playing, the floor is open, and there is still time to discover what's possible when we embrace the beautiful unknown together. Yeah, the dance I never took turned out to be the dance that changed everything. Your dance, whatever form it takes, is waiting for you too. The only question is whether you'll have the courage to take the first step, to trust that love and wisdom and creativity can overcome any obstacle, to discover that you're capable of more beauty and connection than you ever imagined possible. Thank you for spending this time with me today, for allowing me to share this story that has meant so much to my understanding of love, courage, and the art of living fully at every stage of life. The older I get, the more I appreciate these moments of connection, these opportunities to pass along the lessons that have shaped our journeys and to remember that we're all still learning, still growing, still discovering new ways to love and support each other. Remember, my dear friends, that every day offers new opportunities to choose love over fear, to embrace vulnerability rather than self-protection, to find creative solutions when conventional approaches fall short. The world needs more people who understand this balance, who know how to provide support while honoring independence, who can share wisdom without insisting on control. In our later years, we have the privilege of offering the kind of guidance that only comes from experience, of modeling the truth that limitations can become opportunities for creativity, that love finds ways to express itself regardless of circumstances. Like Pop, we can discover that ending one chapter of our lives doesn't mean withdrawing from meaningful participation. It means finding new ways to contribute, to connect, to dance. So trust the foundation you have built over decades of living. Have faith in the love you've shared and the wisdom you have gained. And remember that the most beautiful dances, whether on a wedding floor or in the daily rhythms of a life well lived, are the ones where people choose to support each other, to try something new together, to create moments of connection and joy that honor both individual dignity and shared love. The music is still playing, the dance continues, and there's always room for one more couple willing to step onto the floor with courage, creativity, and love. The only question is whether you're ready to take that first step, to trust that you have something beautiful to offer, to discover that it's never too late to learn a new way to dance. Until we meet again, keep your hearts open to the lessons that life continues to offer. Trust in the power of love to overcome any obstacle. And remember that the best dances and the best years are always yet to come for those who understand that courage isn't the absence of fear, but the decision to act with love despite fear. The dance I never took became the foundation for a lifetime of understanding what it really means to love and be loved, to support and be supported, to find creative ways to overcome whatever limitations life might present. And your dance, whatever form it takes, is waiting for you too. And I have faith that when you find the courage to take that first step, you'll discover more beauty and possibility than you ever imagined.